The overdraft alert came in at 2:47 in the morning, and by the time I got to my grandmother's bank the next day, I was ready to accuse my own uncle of stealing from a woman with Alzheimer's. $600 gone from her checking account every single month for as long as the teller could pull records. My grandmother, Lorraine, was 81 and forgot my name half the time now. Somebody was bleeding her dry, and I was pretty sure I knew who. My uncle Frank had been helping manage her finances for 2 years. He drove a truck he couldn't really afford, and he'd asked me for gas money twice that spring. When I confronted him at Lorraine's kitchen table, he went white, then red, then he just said, "You don't know what you're talking about, Maya," and walked out to his truck and sat there for 20 minutes before he drove off. We didn't speak for 3 weeks after that. I set up alerts on Lorraine's account myself after that fight, determined to catch him in the act. Instead, I caught a name. Every transfer, same recipient. Delphine Ashworth, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'd never heard it in my life. I drove out to Cedar Rapids on a Saturday, half convinced I'd find some scam artist preying on a sick old woman. What I found was a small brick house with a wheelchair ramp and a woman in her 70s who looked at me like she'd been expecting me for years. "You're Lorraine's granddaughter," she said before I even introduced myself. "You have her eyes." Delphine made tea and told me she'd worked the assembly line at the same textile plant as my grandmother back in 1974, and that Lorraine had been her floor supervisor. There'd been a theft investigation that year, missing inventory, real money lost, and Lorraine, 26 years old and terrified of losing her own job, had pointed the finger at Delphine to protect someone else on her line, someone she was covering for. Delphine was fired, blacklisted from the only industry in town, and her marriage fell apart under the strain within 2 years. "She's been sending me money since 1989, Delphine said. $600 a month, sometimes more. She never called it charity. She called it a debt." I sat in that kitchen and felt something crack open in my chest. My grandmother, the woman who taught me to bake bread and never raised her voice, had ruined a stranger's life to save herself, and had spent 4 decades quietly trying to pay it back. Then Delphine told me the second thing, and it knocked the wind out of me completely. Frank already knew. He'd known for over a decade, and rather than stop the payments when Lorraine's memory started slipping, he'd been adding his own money on top of hers every month so the checks wouldn't bounce. The same checks I'd accused him of stealing. I called him crying that night. He didn't say "I told you so," he just said, "I didn't know how to explain it without telling you Grandma's secret, and it wasn't mine to tell." The money problem got worse from there, not better. Lorraine needed full-time memory care within the year, and the facility cost more than her pension covered. Frank and I sat down with the numbers twice, and both times came to the same wall. We couldn't keep sending Delphine's payments and afford Lorraine's care. One of them had to stop. I drove back to Cedar Rapids to tell Delphine myself, because I owed her that much honesty. I sat at her table and explained that my grandmother was dying by inches in a place that cost $4,000 a month, and that I had to end the payments to keep her safe. Delphine didn't argue. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope thick with checks, 11 of them, going back almost a year, every single one uncashed. "I stopped needing the money a long time ago," she said quietly. "I kept cashing them at first because it felt like justice. Then I found out about her diagnosis and I couldn't do it anymore. I was going to drive out and tell her myself that she didn't owe me anything else. I just never found the courage. I stopped the transfers that week and used the 11 uncashed checks, at Delphine's insistence, toward Lorraine's care instead. My grandmother never knew any of this happened. Some days she still asks me who Delphine is when the name comes up, and some days she just looks out the window and says, "I did something bad once," and won't say anything more. I think about those 11 checks sitting in a kitchen drawer in Iowa more than almost anything else in my life. A woman my grandmother wronged 40 years ago had already forgiven her before I ever knocked on her door. She just never got the chance to say it out loud. Was I right to end the payments, or did I take away the one thing keeping my grandmother's guilt from swallowing her whole?